Dr. Brent Wallis joins us now, our guest, friend, Chief Medical Officer of People's Health. Morning, Doc. How are you?
Hey, Tommy. Good morning. I'm doing well.
Appreciate your time. In the United States, more than 40 million individuals are currently developing or at risk of having osteoporosis due to bone loss. And this condition is especially prevalent in those ages 65 and older. And in honor of National Osteoporosis Awareness and Prevention Month, Dr. B from People's Health is going to talk to us about this condition. And Doc, I know my mom smoked in her life, and I know later on in her life was, I wouldn't say doubled over, but she lost a good 5 inches of height due to osteoporosis. What is it?
Yeah, it's pretty common, definitely. Osteoporosis, the best way to think about it, it's when your bones become thin and weak, and therefore they can break more easily over time. And a lot of people don't realize, but your bones are a living organ. And, they're constantly forming new bone and then reabsorbing old bone. So it's breaking down and creating. And what happens with osteoporosis is the breakdown is greater than the formation of new bone. So when that imbalance occurs, your bones become thin, and that's where the risk comes in.
What are some of the symptoms of osteoporosis?
Well, unfortunately, there often are no symptoms whatsoever. Just like a lot of diseases that we screen for, it's completely silent most of the time until something happens. And so, usually, what we find is somebody either has a sudden strain or a little fall or a bump that actually causes a bone to break. And after that break, we end up testing and we find out that you have osteoporosis. One of the other things we'll see sometimes is someone will develop back pain, really severe back pain, and actually when we do x-rays and we screen, we find out that maybe one of the vertebrae, the bones that make up your spine, has collapsed. So, because it's such a silent disease where your body is kind of resorbing those bones too fast, like I was saying, you may not realize that anything's happening. So we recommend that you get screened usually every 2 years, but you should talk to your doctor about what your risk is and how often you need to be screened.
I remember my dad, who with the service and smoking, was a heavy smoker throughout most of his life, had some problem with those back discs as well, which makes me wonder, is osteoporosis a women's disease?
Yeah, a lot of people think it only happens in women, but definitely men are at risk too. It's just much more likely in women. Probably about 8 out of 10 cases are in women. And like I said, usually we recognize it with a fracture, so women are more likely to have fractures as well. What happens with women, and the reason why that is because after menopause, they get a decrease in estrogen, and estrogen is actually protective to that bone loss. It's also it's more common in women because they tend to be lighter and actually have just thinner bones than men do. But, like you mentioned, men definitely can be at risk, especially if you have certain risk factors. You mentioned one of the big ones. Smoking is a huge risk factor for osteoporosis. And it definitely runs in families as well. So if you've got a relative that's had a fracture and found out they had bone loss, then you really need to be thinking about it and maybe get screened. And it does increase with age. We see it a little more commonly in Caucasians or Asian individuals. And then a couple of other things we look for: heavy alcohol use, which is often associated with a low calcium diet, can cause problems with osteoporosis. And then people that are real thin, so real low body weight, tend to actually have a greater amount of bone loss as well.
As my father, how can you lower your risk for osteoporosis?
Well, the number one, and this goes for a whole lot of diseases that we talk about, is stop smoking. Even if you've been smoking for a really long time, stopping smoking now actually helps to slow that rate of bone loss, and so you can actually build new bone and lower your risk that way. And if you drink a lot of alcohol, you really should reduce. This is not a disease where you have to completely eliminate alcohol, but you should limit your intake on a daily basis, and speak with your doctor about, how much alcohol is appropriate for this and other types of diseases. And then I mentioned calcium. Calcium's critical for building new bone, and we always say milk builds strong bones, and that's actually true. There's a lot of calcium in milk that helps to keep your bones strong and healthy. So you need to make sure you get enough of that in your diet. And then another dietary need is actually vitamin D. So calcium can't be absorbed very effectively from your gut unless you also have enough high enough levels of vitamin D. So you have to make sure you get that from either the food you eat or you can get it from the sunshine. And so a cup, 10 to 15 minutes of sun a day usually produces enough vitamin D. But, in New Orleans, make sure you wear your sunscreen if you're going to do that.
And a lot of exercise.
Yeah, exercise is actually critical. And, a lot of people don't know as well that, when you put pressure on your bones using your body for exercise, you're actually kind of stimulating the bone to become stronger. The other thing that happens with exercise is it really helps to strengthen the muscles, especially in your legs and in your trunk. That can help you with your balance and your strength, so that's going to reduce your risk of falls as well. So, it's very important. Exercise helps so many types of diseases, and osteoporosis, it really has a tremendous benefit as well.
Well, let's take a break. We'll talk about what kind of exercise is best for preventing osteoporosis. Dr. Brent Wallis, People's Health, with the 5-star People's Health program, I should say, is our guest, and it is National Osteoporosis Awareness and Prevention Month, and he is talking about it, and we'll talk about the types of exercise that is best to prevent it when we return. 8:20, time for traffic now on WWL. Tommy Tucker, WWL 825, talking about senior health with People's Health, as we do most Thursday mornings here with Dr. B, Chief Medical Officer with the 5-star People's Health program. Doc, we're talking about osteoporosis. What kind of exercise is best for preventing it?
Yeah, really, any type of exercise is great for osteoporosis, but in particular, we usually tell people to do something we call weight-bearing exercises. And weight-bearing exercises is really anything you do that forces you to work against the force of gravity. And, what that does is it really helps you maintain that bone mass and reduce the bone loss. But in particular, it helps you reduce the risk of falling and therefore fractures in particular. So, some examples would be brisk walking or jogging, any sort of racket sports, tennis or pickleball, a lot of people are playing now, hiking, weightlifting, aerobics, or even stair climbing. And then, another type of exercise that's really important is strengthening exercises, something that's going to strengthen your muscles. And like I mentioned, in particularly the muscles around your legs or the muscles around your trunk are super important because that's how you maintain balance and really prevent falls. So, with that, you can do light weights and repetitive motion. That's actually how you build muscle strength. It's something simple I tell people to do. You can get a can of soup or an old milk jug that's filled with water and use that to kind of exercise your upper extremities. You can do something like squats. The one thing about any exercise program to keep in mind, though, is always talk to your doctor before you start one. And the reason for that is you may have other chronic medical problems that might limit some of the things you should do. So you want to talk with us first, and we'll kind of outline a plan for you that's safe and effective.
You mentioned earlier a high calcium diet to prevent osteoporosis. What foods are best, and what would that kind of look like?
Yeah, there's a lot of foods that are very rich in calcium. In particular, I mentioned milk. Milk really does build strong bones. But, in addition to that, any type of milk product is great. So yogurts and cheeses are very good. Egg yolks, in particular, are good for you. And then vegetables. In particular, green leafy vegetables are very good. Things like kale and cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, even Brussels sprouts. And then something I love, fish. Fish has a lot of calcium in it, especially oily fishes like salmon and even sardines. Those are really good. I mentioned, too, about how you need vitamin D in your diet in order to absorb that calcium from your gut. And what's interesting here in New Orleans, you would think with all the sunshine we have around and how hot it is here that you'd get plenty of vitamin D. But what's interesting is we spend so much time indoors in the air conditioning trying to stay cool that quite often we see patients that have vitamin D deficiencies. So it's not uncommon for your doctor to check your blood to see if you might have a vitamin D deficiency, and then they may tell you, hey, we need to add this to your diet, or we may need to give you a vitamin supplement to make sure you're able to use that calcium.
If people want to find out more about People's Health, Doc, how do they do that?
Yeah, they can always visit us on our website at peopleshealth.com, or we'd love people to come by our Medicare Center that we have at the corner of Veterans and Causeway. It's right next to Party City. You can make an appointment to come in and see us, or you can walk in.
5 stars. Talk about that, if you will, please, Doc, because I know we only have a couple of seconds left here, but I know that 5-star rating is pretty important.
Yeah, it's very important. It's a CMS rating, so it's from the government. Basically, it's an indication that your plan provides excellent care to the members that it has. It's the highest rating that you can get. We're very proud of that for this year in 2022.
As you should be. Thanks, Doc. Appreciate your time. Have a great Memorial Day weekend and good summer, okay?
Thanks, Tommy. You too.
You bet. Thank you, sir. You can go to peopleshealth.com to find out more about People's Health. You can go to that People's Health United Healthcare Medicare Center that Dr. B was talking about, 3017 Vets in Metairie next to Party City. They do recommend appointments, but walk-ins are welcome. You can call 1-800-978-9765. You can always follow People's Health on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. It's 8:30. When we come back, we're going to talk with Jacqueline Hotard, get an update on St. John the Baptist Parish. Right now it's time for WWL First News, and for that, we go to Dave Cohen.